Welcome back to Sourdough MD. It's been a little while since we've posted a video, but it doesn't mean we've stopped baking. And today we're going to make one of my favorite sourdough things, and that is the sourdough English muffin. Now, the English muffin, of course, came out of England in the early 1800s, and so it's been around for over 200 years. Up until this point, we have only been making lean doughs, and a lean dough is a dough that's made only of flour, water, and salt. And today we're going to dip our toe into the world of enriched doughs. Enriched doughs not only have flour, water, and salt, but they have additional added sugar and fats. You remember we talked about that gluten protein that creates that chewy texture in the bread. Well, what happens with fats in the dough is the fat coats the gluten and actually shortens the gluten protein and makes it so the bread isn't so chewy. Instead, it has a softer, more billowy crumb. And so today we're going to see that as we bake the sourdough English muffin. The other thing that fats do is fats slow down the process of the yeast.
Slow down the process of the yeast.
And what that means is that the bulk fermentation, or the fermentation stage of the bread baking, is going to take longer. This is a breakfast food typically, and it's perfect because we can throw together the dough the night before, leave it out on the counter, and it's ready to go first thing in the morning after 9 or 10 hours of good sleep. So why don't we go ahead and get started? The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about our basic steps of bread making. Remember, there are 4 major steps. The autolyse step, which is the step where we want to create a lot of gluten. Remember, we don't want to create a lot of gluten for these enriched doughs, so we're going to skip the autolyse step. The second step is the bulk fermentation step. We're going to have this long bulk fermentation that's going to create a lot of great flavor in the bread. The third step is typically the proofing stage, and we're going to skip the proofing stage as well. And finally, there's the baking or the cooking phase, and we're going to see that it's going to be very different with the English muffin. So why don't we go ahead and get started? This time we're going to start out with 100 grams of starter. So we take this active bubbly starter, and we're going to put in 100 grams. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add our liquid. Typically we've been adding water, but this time we're going to go ahead and add 350 grams or milliliters of lukewarm milk that's been sitting out at room temperature. The ideal temperature would be somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. We don't want to get it too hot because we don't want to harm the yeast in the starter. The next thing that we are going to add is we're going to go ahead and add the flour. We're going to add 500 grams of flour. And now we're going to start to add some of those fats and sugars that we talked about. The first thing that we're going to go ahead and add is 40 grams of butter, which is about 3 tablespoons of butter. This butter is unsalted butter that's been sitting out at room temperature. Okay, then we're going to add our sugar. We're going to add about 25 grams of sugar, and you can play with that a little bit depending on what you like. Here's 25 grams. The next thing that we're going to add is the salt. Remember that we want to add about 2% of the weight of the flour in salt. So we're going to add about 12 grams of salt to our mixture. And finally, the next thing that we're going to add is an egg. Now that we've got all of our ingredients together, we're going to go ahead and mix up the mixture. This mixture, you'll notice, is going to be very wet. The reason we want a wet mixture is because we want to increase the hydration level in the dough in order to get big air holes in our bread. Remember, the lower the hydration, like a bagel dough, the more dense the bread texture, and we want an open texture, so we're going to have a high hydration dough. As a result of that, instead of using the dough hook, we're going to use the paddle attachment on our mixer in order to mix up the dough. I'm going to start off at a low speed so that I don't get flour all over. And then we're going to gradually increase the speed of the stand mixer. This is a very, very wet dough. Okay, we're going to get it out of the mixer with a little scraper. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cover it for about 9-10 hours. Remember, it's a slow bulk fermentation process. And as it bulk ferments, it's going to create all of those rich, wonderful flavors. We'll transfer the dough into this mixing bowl. Then we'll cover it for 9 to 10 hours. And then we'll go ahead and you'll see how we cook it up on a griddle. All right, let's get cooking. So excited about this. I wanted to introduce you to my youngest daughter. This is Sophie. She is super fun to have in the kitchen, and she's going to be very helpful when we're making these English muffins. Okay, the first thing, this is our dough. It's been, I told you, about 9-10 hours. We aren't going to bake this bread in the oven. We're actually going to do it on a griddle. You can also do it on the stove top in a cast iron pan or any other pan. But we love using a griddle because we can control the temperature so well. So think pancakes when we're talking about English muffins. And remember, pancake batter is very, very thin, and this dough is also not going to be stiff. It's going to be tough to work with. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to start by putting an ample amount of flour on our bench, okay? So we'll put a bunch of flour on our bench, and then we're going to tip the dough out, and you can see what this looks like. So we're going to coat it well with some flour. The other thing is I have tried to roll this with a rolling pin, and what I find is that it really sticks to the bench. And so the best thing that I have found when working with this dough is just to simply stretch it out with your hands. And what we want is we want the dough to be about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick. Sophie, if you want to go ahead and cut some of those muffins. And Sophie's going to push down and turn. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to take a bench scraper, and we're going to take that muffin and we're going to put it right on to a little parchment paper. I find that it helps if we simply spray the parchment paper with a little bit of canola oil. That I put it on some sprayed parchment paper, and I'm simply just going to cut the parchment paper. So what I'll do is I'll simply pick up my row of muffins and I'll just put them right onto the griddle, just like so. Okay. One of the reasons I like to use the griddle is because we can cook these at a fairly precise temperature, and I found that the best temperature is to cook them between about 300 degrees Fahrenheit and about 375 degrees Fahrenheit. It usually takes about 7 minutes on the first side, about 5 minutes on the other side, but sometimes give or take a little bit. But the key is the instant read thermometer. Again, remember that bread is fully cooked when the internal temperature of the bread is between 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, use that instant read thermometer. Simply place the thermometer into the side of the muffin and check the internal temperature. Okay, while we finish up our last 3, we're going to show you what these completed English muffins look like. Okay, this is what they look like. You can make them as pretty as you want depending on how careful you are as you cut them out. Let me show you how you open an English muffin and how an English muffin is properly eaten. So again, the way that an English muffin is opened is by simply forking the English muffin, which is taking a fork and running it around the edge of the muffin. And when you open the muffin, you get that nice, beautiful, rough interior. and that's going to grab onto all that wonderful butter after we toast it. So we're going to go ahead and toast this, and we'll show you how we eat them too. So we've finished toasting our English muffins, and now we're going to use some of our homemade cultured butter, which is for a different video and a different time. And we're going to butter these English muffins. Sophie's going to take one half and I'll try the other.
That's good.
That's good. So we hope you've enjoyed making English muffins with us. One other final tip with the English muffins is that these freeze really well. One tip is that if you want to fork them all open and then freeze them, it's much easier when you get them out of the freezer. You can pop them into the toaster and they work just great. We hope you enjoy making your own sourdough English muffins.